Hello everyone, you're watching Marios History Talks. I'm Mario Rostovsky, and we have an amazing live episode once more, but this time from another part of Macedonia, lovely Solun. So, I'm here today in front of the site of the former French Banque Ottoman. This is the reconstructed building. So why am I here, you may ask? Well, if you might have seen one of my previous videos on the Gemidzhi, the Solun assassins, then you know this is the site of the actual explosion of the original French Banque Ottoman in the spring of 1903. This is the site where it happened. So let's refresh and see what happened. Well, in the spring of 1903, a group of about 10 young Macedonians, mostly from around Veles. They were about in their 20s, like I said, and they were morbidly obsessed with trying to free their country and free their people and dying young for Macedonia at all costs. What they decided to do was essentially hit European capital interests right in the heart to truly draw Western European attention to the plight and suffering of the Macedonian people. So, on the morning of April 28th, as you know, Pavel Shatev blows up the French ship, the Guadalquivir, in the Bay of Salonika, which is right down the street over here. He escapes, and most of the ship remains damaged and inoperable, so the ship is at a complete loss. The same day, though, the railroad lines are hit by another member of the Solun assassins as well, further inflicting harm on the city. It's on the morning of April 29th that the real action begins to happen. The day begins out deceptively calm. However, it's Kostadin Kirkov, a man from Veles as well. He shuts down the main gas and water lines of the city. He plunges the entire city into darkness. And this is the point of no return for the rest of the assassins. They know at this stage the city's going to be immobilized. There's not going to be any communication going to and from the Ottomans, so they know they have to proceed with their attacks. And what happens here? Well, right across the street from this bank here, I'm not quite sure which side it would have been on, but the Gemidzhi, they rented out a barber shop. In some sources, they say it was a grocery shop. Nonetheless, it was a store they rented out. And what they did is they, for months, spent time and resources literally tunneling underneath the streets here to get to the Ottoman Bank. This actually happened in the late 1800s as well by another anarchist group, but it wasn't completed. So they actually had to build a new tunnel to connect to the old tunnel. So they start digging. It takes months for them to do so. They finally get finished by the spring of 1903. At this stage, they know that even an uprising is going to be coming up. They're told by Gotadilchev to not do these attacks, to try to postpone them. He knows that they're hotheads, but he knows their heart is in the right place, even if their minds aren't. So they proceed anyway with their attacks. The Ottomans during this time period knew the revolution was also coming up. So what do? They posted more and more guards along the rooftops, trying to look for those suspicious activities, not knowing whatsoever what was happening quite literally right underneath their noses, right underneath the street. So the tunnel is built. Dynamite is acquired from various outside sources. Everything's staged here to start the actual attacks. So on the night of the attacks, Orce Pop Jordanov, the main perpetrator of the soon-to-be explosion, he sits down and pens a letter to his beloved Katerina, his girlfriend. Now, Orce Pop Jordanov, he's one of the more interesting members of the Gemidzhi for two reasons. A, he knew he wasn't going to live long, so there's actually no recorded photographs of him. He knew his life was so transient, he didn't want any permanent photographs to exist of his life here. And secondly, Orce Pop Jordanov is the brother of Mile Pop Jordanov, another young, tragic loss in the fight for Macedonia. So, Orce Pop Jordanov writes a letter to Katerina, and in the letter, he not only explains his love for her, but essentially why he decided he had to die for Macedonia. So, I'm going to read over what he said here, some excerpts here. The first time I saw you, I loved you. You were my only joy, but I felt that I had no right to associate with you. I do not belong to myself, but to the work that was the purpose and meaning of my life, to work and to die for the freedom of my people, my beloved Macedonia. No, I prefer to die. With my death, I will throw at the enemies, the enslavers of my homeland, my boundless contempt. And so, as I lived, I want to die, modestly and honestly, completely true to myself. I wanted to be and remain a complete person. So on the night of April 29th, Orce Pop Jordanov lights the fuses. This building is blasted to kingdom come. This is, of course, a reconstructed site of the original building. Of course, it was completely destroyed, and I'll show you some photographs of the aftermath. So, it gets completely destroyed, rocks the entire city to its very core. Orce, at this point, he actually manages to escape. He goes to his apartment, not very far from here, down the street, and there he engages the Ottomans for a 3-hour-long shootout from his window. After all the bullets and bombs are spent, though, he is finally killed. Now, the next morning, the Ottomans, after having realized the scope and the severity of the attacks, they track where he was living. They enter in his apartment. They called it the den there. They find his body completely dead. The Ottomans were completely enraged by what he had done. They wanted to take his body and mutilate it throughout the streets to scare the population here. But the senior commanding soldier stopped the young soldier. He said, "No, don't touch the body. This is how you die for your country." So in a way, they actually showed their respect, knowing the tragedy of how young and how idealistic they were to free Macedonia. So, what are we going to do now? Well, let's walk over to the bank. Okay, so I have a rose here. Why do I have it? Well, in the famous 1961 movie, Salunski Attentatori, on the last night before they're setting out their attacks, this is a fictionalized account, all the assassins are having a drink together. And Konstantin Kirkov has this amazing speech. He says, and I'll do it in Macedonian here, "Ние не бараме слава. Доволно е ако еден ден луѓето разбират зошто загинавме. И на местото каде што загинавме, не ни остават споменици, туку еден свет. Еден свет со боја на срцето." That's what we're doing right now. Се арчиме за Македонија.